let's say you're gonna buy some goats and you're like, hey, I'm gonna put them in this rough land and they're gonna do great. You may literally just kill your goats, because unless they are used to that or they build up to that, they very well possibly may not even know what to graze on. That is very interesting to me. Welcome to A Simple Life. I've come across a dilemma, and here's my dilemma, is we have two sets of goats. We have our meat goats and we have our dairy goats. And our dairy goats have been raised more conventionally. And what I mean by more conventionally is they have a barn that they stay in, that they go back to every night. They have pasture that we put them in, that's kind of, they're rotated in and out of, but it's nothing fantastic. And what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to put them in better and better pasture and areas that they could work around our home farm. And they're not interested. They kind of go around, they kind of graze whatever's on the ground, like sheep kind of. But my goats up here, as you can hear, they're following me around, calling at me because they want feed. And they know what I'm about to do, which is cut down a bunch of stuff for them. The interesting part is I have two sets of goats that behave totally differently. And it's my fault. Let me explain. My meat goats have never been fed grain. They'll eat hay, they'll eat alfalfa pellets if I put it down, but some of them, they don't even know what it is, so they have no idea. But our dairy goats, on the other hand, they expect that as food, and then everything else is extra. It's the exact opposite for my meat goats. When I went back and I started mowing the area for the goats and opening it up, I realized that they were expecting grass like sheep. They were expecting groomed grass, areas that they could literally just mow, which is complete opposite of what I was expecting to give them. I was expecting them to go in and do work for me, but that's not what was happening. And to show you the contrast, yesterday I came in here and I cleaned out a lot of brush. And it's really interesting to see even little baby goats that are less than a month old grazing on fresh leaves. They already know what to do. Those are some of the triplets, and they're already grazing on fresh leaves. Here's the whole rest of the herd. Everybody's just showed up back here, and they're all grazing on what I put down on the ground yesterday. I did not expect that our dairy goats wouldn't just want to go into an area and just browse it down. And I realized as I was mowing it that I have to think of them as a different herd. I can't think of them as the same thing as I have up here, or I will kill them because I won't give them the food they need. So I'm saying all this to say, when you move to a farm or you move to a homestead and you decide that you're going to start working the land, you're going to put animals on the land, they're going to graze off the land, you better make sure that you transition them to that, because they may have the instincts to do that, but they may have been trained to eat from a feeder. And if that's the case, well, you may be in trouble and you may lose some animals, well, basically to starvation or to malnourishment when it comes to they don't know where to get the certain minerals, the certain things that they need from the land. Just a thought. I'm gonna cut some brush down, but I wanna show you some of these young goats following their moms around and eating. Those built-in instincts that they're getting from their mother is what is gonna make my herd continue to grow and be self-sufficient off of the land. In the last year, I may have fed them maybe $100 worth of hay and alfalfa. And the herd's growing and it's really starting to flourish. And I'm actually having to start to do some of this land management with them, which is really exciting because it's what I want to do. I want to be able to come into an area. I'm going to show you a second what I did here. I like to come into an area that is completely encroached by what I'm going to call an invasive species, which is the big leaf maple. And it's not invasive, it's just invasive for the way that it grows. It really takes over area. So I'm going to show you what I did. This is what I want to show you. This was a whole clump of big leaf maple. You can see there's probably about 10 or 12 branches that I cut off. And I left them the healthiest, straightest one. But this whole canopy, all this was all eaten up by this one tree. So I put it down and the goats have just been devouring it. But this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about opening up the canopy. Because look on the ground, other than dogs, there's nothing growing on the ground at all. Like there is nothing. And that is not because my goats ate it. There's just nothing growing because the trees are blocking all the sunlight from hitting here. And so the only thing we really end up getting in here is a lot of blackberry bramble, but that's old blackberry bramble. See, this is all old stuff. There's no feed here. There's no nutritional value for my goats here, and it's not feeding the land any. So I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna continue to do what I'm doing, where I'm opening up just enough of the canopy so we can get some fresh life on the ground. And that's gonna help retain my soil. Why do I wanna retain my soil? Well, because right down in this valley, about 700 feet below me, are fields, and they are chocolate brown with topsoil. They're conventionally farmed, but they're just chocolate brown with the topsoil. And you're going, oh, well, that's just because they have really good soil. Yeah, because all the soil came off the top of these hills and have slowly washed down because there's nothing growing up here, because we don't have animals coming through and grazing this heavily. So nothing's being grazed down. There's nothing being returned to the ground by animals because we don't have the big deer population we used to have in this area. I have my own deer population. They're called my goats. And so between me and the goats, we are going to try to build good topsoil for my trees, for my animals, for our property. That's one of the things that I'm really big on, is trying to manage everything that I can on the property so that way I'm mimicking the environment that was originally here. Herman's told me stories about these woods that when he moved here, there were deer paths that were there were ruts 6-8 inches deep, just a rut right through the woods, and there was so many deer going through that same exact spot that they had worn a rut into the woods. That's really cool. That's really, really cool. And I say it's cool because, well, that's a lot of deer, and that's a lot of grazing, and that's migrations of herds that are coming through and really doing something amazing to the land. So on my land, we're gonna use goats to do that. And I know it's a little different, and it's not really farming per se, but it is managing the land so that way it's healthy, and it does give me a way to naturally build soil and build nutrients into my soil, because everywhere the goats go, they poo. Everywhere they go. And so the goats are gonna come through and they're gonna poo while they eat, which is really different than if I was just to feed goats in a barn. They're just gonna poop in the barn, and then I gotta go spread it. Well, these guys naturally are just spreading it and doing their business. So exciting to see what they're doing, and also to see the young ones and to contrast them against the herd of dairy goats we have at home, which means I need to do some work with our dairy goats at home, because I'm obviously missing the mark, and I need to work better on getting my goats used to grazing and switching between fields and actually truly looking for their nutrition on the field, not the nutrition from a feeder. All right, let's get some of this cleaned up, and then we'll see those baby goats graze a bunch. This is probably one of the harder kind of days because I came across this huge thing of blackberry bramble right here. And it's high enough off the ground that the goats can't really do much more to it damage-wise. So there was some hazelnut behind it, and I created a gap. So I created this pocket behind there so they can get in and work both sides and get some work done. Basically, that's what I've done. It's not perfect. Ideally, it'd be a lot lower on the ground, but I don't have any like maples to drop right on top of it in the vicinity. There's nothing around that's big enough that I could reach it, that I could drop on top of it. So this is what it's gonna look like. And I don't wanna kill off this hazelnut. I'm gonna drop a few more branches, but it's also not big enough to put pressure on this blackberry bramble. So the best I can do is let the goats do a lot of damage, cut back as much of it as I can, let the hazelnut feed the goats as well. But you can see the little baby goats are really figuring out what they're supposed to eat. And it's really stinking cool. There's a little one right there. That's Mama. Mama's showing him what to eat. There you go. Oh, yep, yummy, yummy, yummy. What do you think about those unripe blackberries? They fit your personality there. They had all day, and all day they spent right over in that pasture where there's none of this canary reed grass, there's no sorghum popping up, there's none of this browse or this foliage for them to eat on. And so now look at them. They're like, oh, there's food, I can't believe it, look at all this food. But they've had all day to come in here. And they've actually had access to this pasture, not cut down the way it is, but they've had access to this pasture for over a month. For over a month, they refused to come over here and eat. So I came in and I mowed it. And I mowed all the big tall weeds down. And I say weeds, there were some weeds in here. And I mowed it right where they lay. We're not trying to pick it up. We're not moving it. We're just mowed it, let it sit on the ground. It'll decompose and it'll build soil over time. Now you can see how tall this stuff has gotten. Now the reason I didn't mow this down is because I need to come in here and there's some dirt piles in here and I can't drive over it with the mower. But I did get them all the way down by the pond and all the way around the outside. And I'm hoping that they won't just graze where I mowed, but they'll graze into some of this and they'll cut some of their own paths, a lot like my meat goats. Now, I understand these guys have not had the same exposure to the land, and I've spent 3.5 years building my meat goat herd to what it is today, to browse the way they browse and eat the way they eat, and these are not the same. So what does all this have to do with transitioning goats from conventional barn feeding to grazing? Well, you gotta do it one step at a time, which means get your goats out there, still provide them with the barn feed that they need and they want and they're used to, but get them out and get them grazing. Start rationing back that barn feed a little. And when I say barn feed, whether you feed them grain or hay or alfalfa pellets or whatever you're feeding them, start rationing that back a little so that way when they're out and they're in a new pasture, they're hungry. And if they're hungry, they will get out and start grazing. They're not gonna starve if they have stuff there. But if you cut them off completely or you buy part of a herd and they tell you, oh, they've never been grained, and all of a sudden you get them and they're like staring at the bucket waiting for feed, somebody might have lied to you. In that case, feed them grain or alfalfa pellets or whatever you can feed them until you get them used to eating off the land. Because eating off the land is really where they're gonna pay for themselves. We don't really sell many goats. Now, eventually I will be selling some goats because we're starting to build quite an amazing and an impressive herd that is completely fed off the land. And that's something that I think a lot of homesteaders are starting to look for is, hey, how can I manage land? How can I deal with this and actually have a herd that eats off the land and isn't eating from my pocketbook? Transitioning them, I would transition over the course of months, not weeks, months, because you're changing their whole entire digestive tract, you're changing their rumen, and a drastic change to a goat's rumen is a good way to have bloat or to also cause issues with their overall health because they're not getting the nutrition they're used to. So if you're gonna change them from being barn fed to land fed, take your time, do it slowly, make sure you're seeing them graze things down aggressively. You put them in a new area, see what they're hitting. If all they're doing is hitting the grass, they may not quite be ready. But if they're starting to hit the leaves off the brush, they're starting to strip things back, they're starting to really create an appetite for different things like poison oak or poison ivy or hawthorn, or, you know, I'm naming the stuff that we have in our area, locust, poplar, whatever it is. If they're starting to really get an appetite for that stuff, that's great. Then that's when I would start kind of transitioning them a little bit more, take a little bit more of that barn feed away, until the only time you're really giving them barn feed is maybe when they're on the milking stand, which I totally agree with. We give our goats an organic alfalfa pellet when they're on the milk stand because they're providing milk for us and for their babies. And so that works out really good. Thank you so much for joining us today on A Simple Life. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you got a lot out of it. And I hope your goat herd is doing marvelous. And I hope they're beautiful like mine. All right, have a great day. Bye.